to make it clear.
Well, I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with a panel of bloggers and opinion shapers. Joining me tonight, here's the political columnist at the National Business Review, commentator and moral shepherd of the right, Matthew Hooton, and here's a former Green Party MP, human rights activist and blogger, Keith Locke. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, Budget 2013. What should the government be spending money on? Issue 2, how bad is John Key's poker face in light of how good a deal Sky City managed to cut? And Issue 3 tonight, was the Aaron Gilmore fiasco a pointless distraction? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with Issue 1. The budget has been delivered, and amongst a sea of mixed economic indicators, the National Party's austerity has been mixed with a few lollies in the form of vague promises on child poverty and first-time home buyers. Matthew, if Bill English considers these lollies, he's never read Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. What does National need to do to make this budget politically palatable?
Well, I think that the question's not the correct question. Firstly, there hasn't been a period of austerity. Vast amounts, $40 billion have been borrowed by the government to stimulate the economy over the 5 years that it's been in office so far. So far from austerity, there's been a huge
social austerity.
There's been a huge stimulus package. Secondly, it isn't awful when politicians use that phrase "lollies." I mean, it trivialises things, doesn't it? I mean, either there are important investments in the future of New Zealand, in which case they should be funded out of our taxes, or they shouldn't be funded at all. Yeah. But I think you have to see this in a context of quite an amazing economic turnaround over 5 years. And Bill English is a sort of dour South Island farmer. He's not my cup of tea, but anyway. But he's taken this middle course. He was elected, or became finance minister, and he said his first priority, despite the decade of forecast deficits left by Michael Cullen, he said his first priority is to protect people from the hard edges of the recession. He said he would not cut people's benefits, he would not cut state entitlements, and then secondly he would try and get back to surplus and lay the groundwork for economic growth. Well, it was all a bit boring. The right wing criticised him for not doing anything bold, like Don Brash recommended with the 2025 task force. The left kept going on that they thought he should have borrowed even more than he did, the 20 billion or whatever it's been so far. In fact, it was 18 billion in 1 year in 2010.
It's almost 58 billion so far.
Yeah, so you've got this. You've got to this point where New Zealand is now the fourth fastest growing economy in the OECD plus China and the countries the OECD monitors. We're behind only China, Russia and Luxembourg. You've got unemployment falling. It's going to go below 6% in the next year, which by world standards,
natural disaster,
which by world standards is extraordinarily low, and things are coming right, and we're going to be back in surplus, just as he promised.
But isn't more of that to do with the fact of New Zealand's particular microclimate created by our geographic position, close to Australia, close to China? They're our largest trading partners. Well, that's been created mostly to do with that. It's got nothing to do with the direction of the government.
No. In fact, I think the opposite is true. And again, you know, the proviso that Bill English is no mate of mine. Our two major trading partners, number one, China now, and Australia, both are slowing. Australia probably going to move into recession under the Labor government there, and China now slowing. And in fact, the extraordinary economic turnaround that we've seen, particularly in the last 6 months, is almost unique to New Zealand. So it has to be caused by endogenous factors. It's not because China's boomed or Australia's boomed. It's because actually that boring, dour approach of the Southland farmer has turned out to be the right one.
Keith, tens of thousands of state tenants have been put on notice that they will be forced out of their homes.
3,000.
And their houses sold out.
3,000.
Well, all up, it'll be all 58,000, won't it? From under them, politically sadistic or prudent economic management?
Well, I think the problem is that this is an austerity budget and the poor people are suffering the most. And in reality, there's been no increase in health, education, conservation. The budget has actually gone back in both dollar terms and percentage terms. And who's suffering? There's nothing dealing with poverty here, although there's some talk about something in the future. There's nothing in terms of redirecting expenditure into productive enterprise rather than, building up the housing. Capital gains taxes, which would raise more money and give more impetus. Just comparing us with Western Europe, with Australia going backwards, whatever, I don't think that's right. We are in a very static state. The debt's too high. There's not the money being put into innovation and supporting enterprise that there could be. And one of the only good things in the budget really are things I've picked up from the Green and Labor parties, like extending the income-related rents to social housing, giving a bit of money for that, continuing on with the home insulation program, warrant of fitness for housing and things like that, which will produce better houses, particularly in the rental sector.
How can it be an austerity budget when the government was elected, Michael Cullen had actually got debt to zero. Now it's gone up to some tens of billions. How can it be an austerity budget when there is 1.6 billion more for health, which is actually not a trivial increase? It's far higher than an inflation increase or a population increase. There's another 900 million for education. The greatest amount of money in the history of New Zealand is going to be spent by the government next year. The greatest amount of money in the history of New Zealand will be spent on health. The greatest amount of money in the history of New Zealand on education. The greatest amount of money in the history of New Zealand on welfare. I mean, and it's an austerity budget. And that's what we have. The lunatic left calls the record levels of expenditure austerity. It calls borrowing still quite a large fiscal deficit austerity. And of course it is because the far left, lunatic left, which we unfortunately are at risk of having in power, its solution would be to print the money.
And a lot of this, any money that they are getting for extra expenditure, and it's not over, it's, you'll see the health sector and the education sector really screaming in the next few days because the basic expenses aren't being covered there. But it's coming from selling of Mighty River Power and the income stream that would come from that. And now they're going into selling
hospitals. It's an interesting twist, isn't it? That National has been borrowing huge amounts of money. But I suppose the question is, where is that money going? Is it going into society as a whole, or is it going into the hands of those who are already wealthy? $2 billion we've put into the top tax bracket and tax cuts.
Yeah.
I mean,
and charter schools gets a bit out of this budget, etc.
16 million is going into charter schools out of
19 million.
19 million. Yep. Over 4 years, it's less than $5 million a year is going into charter schools.
And what are they doing now? They're announcing that the selling of Meridian with all the hydro and all the wind power, which could be used with a proper government program
and irrigation.
And a $90 million irrigation.
We could be leaders in renewable energy around the world, and Meridian has got some investments around the world. That could be something that we could use positively for the country instead of selling it all off.
Matthew,
well, it's not all being sold off, is it? It's 49% of the future dividend stream is being sold off. The dams, the wind farms stay exactly where they are.
Who cares about a surplus if you don't have job security and can't buy a house? How important is it to get that 75 million surplus in 2015? And is it only possible by dumping New Zealand super fund contributions?
Well, it's somewhat important, is the answer. I mean, obviously, it's not of crucial importance.
But it's a political importance?
I don't think we're going to know by election whether it's been achieved. So it's of some importance. Of course, it would have been some billions of dollars higher had Bill English not decided to put the 1.6 billion extra into health, the 900 million extra into education, and so forth.
And how much to be put into
the government has decided. The government has decided that instead of having a big-ish surplus in 2014-15, it would invest in social policy. So that was the trade-off that has been made, as well as ACC has done well, largely as a result of the booming economy and the booming share market over the last year. So ACC levies are going to come down, which of course we all pay. So that's like a mini tax cut.
Keith, Whānau Ora budget has been cut back. How long do the Māori Party remain committed to this relationship with National?
Yeah, they've got a few crumbs in terms of Māori training and things like that, but it's just crumbs compared with nothing really to address poverty, to rehabilitate Māori who are in prisons, or any of the real things that are needed if we're to address the income differential between Pākehā, Māori and Pacifica, which is still extreme. And what the welfare section of the budget is more on work testing and putting more money into that, rather than increasing anything for poor people, extending the working for families to beneficiaries. Poverty is still going to be a huge problem. They're promising perhaps some food in schools thing further down the track, but it's all crumbs at the moment.
Well, I think one of the significant things in there, that of the big welfare budgets, education, health and so forth, the social policy budgets, it is true welfare is only getting a $200 million increase, which in the context of welfare is quite small. I think one of the significant things there, though, is they are looking like they're going to try and help people more individually than ever before. So there is this provision for 354 more social workers. The day that you would think a national government would employ 354 new social workers.
Yeah, what are these social workers doing? Forcing people back to work.
The social workers aren't really there as social workers. They're there to come up with reasons to cut people off the budgets. You must be a little bit more honest.
I mean, you can.
Ideological stormtroopers is a better frame for it.
You know, I really don't think that people who are trained social workers are going to be ideological stormtroopers. I think that's silly. I think they're going to be employed to help people into work, and you know that's quite a good thing.
Final question to both of you: is this budget a vote winner?
I don't think so. People will look at it and say, well, what's really changed? And I think you'll find a lot of screams from the conservation sector, the education sector, health sector, welfare sector, you name it. I don't think it'll get many plaudits.
Are we gonna hear happy?
No, I think it's probably true that the teacher unions, which fund the Labour Party, will say that the budget's terrible, even though more money ever in the history of New Zealand is going to be spent on the school system, and they will say it's all terrible. I think Keith's right. It's not designed to be a vote winner. What I think is the vote winner is the fact that we've got the fourth fastest economic growth in the world, that unemployment's falling and low. I think those are the underlying economic
couldn't we
data.
be better than Europe?
Europe's
well, socialist Europe that follows the Labour Party prescription, by
hardly socialist,
and not socialist enough.
And the countries which are most socialist, like Sweden, are the ones that have 25% youth unemployment, which is far higher than ours. So it's funny. The countries that follow what the silly left would call neoliberalism seem to be doing
better than a lot of the rest.
Scandinavia has far higher unemployment than New Zealand.
And better conditions too. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 2, we all suspected the Convention Centre for Pokies deal would never stand the scratch and sniff test of public opinion, but the staggering amount that the government have given away through the deal has left a large questions. Keith, a 35-year gun to the head of any government that challenges Sky City's profits, is that a little extreme?
It is a little extreme, and it raises a very interesting debate around contracts, because one government makes a contract with a company, are subsequent governments responsible for fulfilling the terms of that contract? And in this case, it being very much a health issue, and it depends how you see that health issue, how much you see the government should stick to the terms of the contract. If it was something like, you know, subsidising the price of smokes, I think people would say, well, no, the government isn't responsible for fulfilling the terms of that contract because it's killing people directly. In fact, pokies, the way I see it and the way a lot of New Zealanders see it, is also killing people and destroying families. There's about 500,000 New Zealanders who in their family have someone who's a problem gambler and is affecting their family fortunes. And this is only increasing that number very seriously. So I think it's quite correct for the Greens to say, we're just going to cancel the contract.
Matthew, is this a case of what happens when the Prime Minister gets too personally involved in a deal and he risks political capital if he doesn't get it through, meaning the taxpayer gets a pretty shoddy deal?
Well, you know, I'm against this sort of hands-on government. I believe in hands-off government. I'm from the Thatcher, Reagan, Douglas, Richardson school, so I don't believe in the government getting involved in the commercial world in this way. But New Zealanders do support this sort of thing. New Zealanders say they want hands-on government. The Labour Party says that this government's not hands-on enough. I mean, I don't know how much more hands-on John Key could be than this particular deal.
But pimping for a casino is pretty low,
well, that's look, as I say, I'm against this sort of thing. I think that it was fewer pokey machines than was expected, 250 rather than the market thought.
Plus the gaming, plus some gaming tables.
Which
and
I think
34 million budget.
I think it fit. I think in the terms of the long-term contract thing, I think that it is an interesting constitutional point. And under our constitution, you know, first-year law students are asked to write that famous essay, if Parliament voted to kill all blue-eyed babies, would that be the law of New Zealand? And Sir Robin Cook, Lord Cook of Thorndon, wrote some dicta and some judgments saying no, he felt that some common law rights are so great that Parliament can't override them. But in fact, the correct answer to the essay question is yes. So yes, the Greens can come in and override the contract if they wished. I think that would cause an immediate and massive and disastrous outflow of investment, not just by foreigners investing in New Zealand, but by New Zealanders themselves.
Let's get into that.
So
Let's get into that.
Very dangerous.
Let's get into that. The Greens have been very quick to attack the deal, and they claim they would revoke it no matter what the cost. But with 1,000 jobs on the line this time
and a half
next year,
centre,
is that a credible threat?
I
mean, you're talking 1,000 jobs, Keith.
I think it's a credible threat in terms of the pokie machines. You just say, well, we're not going to allow you, we're going to cut back those pokie machines to the original before the contract. I think that's what they'd have to do.
But the
and
convention
who would finish the convention centre could be worked out with.
Well, I guess the Greens could print money to build the convention centre.
You're being very disingenuous
or borrow it from Australian banks.
Another aspect of this debate is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where under that an international arbitrator could come in and say,
that's correct.
You are bound to pay compensation
Jane
at this
Kelsey's
level.
fears are real, aren't they?
And that
no, Jane Kelsey's fears are absolutely ridiculous, and she knows as well as everyone else that there is no possibility of the Trans-Pacific Partnership ever being agreed. But people like Jane Kelsey and Tim Grosser are two sides of the same coin, that they enjoy the subsidised international travel they get to go to negotiations that they know are going nowhere, especially now Japan. It is not terribly unfair. There is not a single credible observer international trade policy who thinks the Trans-Pacific Partnership is anything more than a joke, especially now Japan has joined it. But it serves people's interest to fly around the world and pretend otherwise, including those academics and the renter mob leftists that go to the
but if the TPP is not agreed to, one of the reasons is because it's got this undermining sovereignty element
that's nonsense.
to it.
The reason it won't be agreed to is because
the
reason it won't be agreed to is because Japan will never agree to lift its tariffs, and they certainly will never agree to liberalise their rice market.
That's one of the reasons.
That is the decisive reason.
If we could bring it back to the Sky City deal. The deal is so one-sided, even hardcore National Party voters are a little bit disappointed. Is Key risking empowering the Conservative Party with this sort of deal?
Possibly, although gay marriage is the better issue for the Conservative Party. Look, I think they've got this out before the budget. The Convention Centre deal polls unbelievably badly.
Really?
Right. So let's accept that. It is an incredibly unpopular deal, but it does deliver New Zealand a convention centre without a single dollar of taxpayers' money going into it, which is good. I think the difficulty the Greens have, and Labour to some extent, is they say unemployment in New Zealand is too high, and they want it to come down, and they say jobs are their priority. They are against intensivising agriculture. The Green Party, Celia Wade-Brown, gave a speech at the opening of Wellington International Airport where she said she was against international tourism.
That's not true because she's
of the carbon emissions.
It all the
because
time.
of the carbon emissions. You've got Labour and the Greens are against mining. They're against the convention centre.
Well, they're not against.
You're against aquaculture.
Labour's very pro-mining.
Labour's, but the Greens who say
the Greens have never had an anti-mining.
Labour and the Greens. There was a moratorium on the Green policy. They have a moratorium on mining. The Greens opposed the Bathurst mine.
There's never been a Green moratorium
the Greens,
on
mining. The Greens are against oil exploration. The Labour is against aquaculture. Labour and the Greens are both against expanding fishing quotas.
This is a typical argument.
So what jobs you want? You want smart green jobs. But it will take a hell of a lot
None of the things you've said
hickey,
the Greens or Labour against, are they actually against?
Every single thing
they're
I've
against
said can be cited.
specific elements
the Green policy
of
is
mining,
to have a moratorium on offshore oil drilling in New Zealand.
Thank you, panel.
You're against
We'll have to move on. We'll have to move on. Moving on this evening with issue 3 tonight, the Aaron Gilmore fiasco has finally ended with a pretty heartfelt apology and retreat. Now the media feeding frenzy is over. Was the myopic media focus legitimate? Matthew, was political mercenary Simon Lusk involved in talking Aaron down, and did Cameron Slater help that along with all the leaks on his blog?
Yes, and the other player in it was a guy called Jordan Williams, who works for Stephen Franks.
Yep. Why did they move so quickly to get rid of Aaron? Why was it a problem for them?
They don't like him.
Really? That's it? They just don't like him? So
Yeah.
they hounded him out of Parliament?
Yes.
Why?
Well, they don't like him, and they
Did he
decided.
deserve it?
I think he probably deserved it. Yeah.
Keith, well, that's an interesting insight. Keith, was Aaron a useful distraction when the focus should have been on new GCSB powers and the Sky City deal? I mean, it was very, very convenient, wasn't it?
But it was, nobody planned it, so I don't
you
really
sure?
see it as a. Well, I
Well,
don't.
that's what I'm
no,
hearing over here.
Nobody planned. I don't think anyone planned what Aaron Gilmore actually said on that
Oh, no.
night.
But it got leaked quickly, didn't it?
It got leaked quickly, yes.
By people who were
And
there.
it had a positive and a negative the way it played out to me. The positive is it sort of reinforced the Kiwi thing against people being too egotistical and arrogant. So that's, other people will be reluctant to go around saying, "Don't you know who I am?" So in that sense it was
Okay,
positive.
so from that
but
point
the negative thing was, it was just straight overkill. And I get worried when, like, it's a cumulative thing and you can't necessarily blame every media outlet, but it was just total overkill, and Aaron Gilmore's version of events was never accepted in the slightest, and everything negative about him was brought in cartoons,
Well,
and
that's
you name it.
But
And
he's a liar and a fantasist. I think
yeah,
that's quite
but
clear.
the thing that worries me is, and it's the same with some of the poor criminals from, dysfunctional families who you see on TV that have committed some crime. There's a whole focus that there's not a recognition that there's a human being there. And Aaron Gilmore's a human being, so you almost have a bit of sympathy with him after all the hammering he gets. He's not just, he's sort of cutting him out of the human race. He's got to rehabilitate his life, and I hope he does okay with his family, etc. But I just have a sympathy for the underdog a bit coming through this.
How much of it was a media beat-up? I mean, once Patrick Gower gets a story between his teeth, it becomes this huge Titanic epic.
Yeah, some people are more over the top than others, but individually everyone had a go, and collectively it just, I don't know, I got a bit sick of it. But let's go on to the real issues.
Was it manufactured?
I think there was some good media management involved in this. I think that it's a step too far to say that the actual occasion of the dinner was pre-planned in advance, although some people have suggested that to me. I don't know. I mean, we all behave badly from time to time. I behave disgracefully from time to time. And what tends to happen is my friends will tell me to pull my head in and put me in a taxi and send me home if that happens. And I've done that for friends as well. I mean, we have a binge drinking culture in New Zealand, for better or for worse. And I would have thought that if your friend is clearly drunk and can't behave themselves anymore, you just go and pay the bill and just take him out of the restaurant.
But they didn't.
What seemed to happen is he was the one who was dealing with the waiter, which seems unusual. Then, of course, there didn't seem to be an apology right there and then. There was a note that was given to the waiter the next morning, and somehow within a few hours or a few days, that was known by the Dominion, and so I think I've got to applaud those who were advising Andrew Richards, who's also a member of the National Party and has political aspirations, for the way in which the issue was managed.
Interesting.
But he should have resigned. I mean, he's an absolute dickhead. Let's not forget
Final
that.
question, both of you. What will new MP Claudette Hoiti bring to Parliament?
Well, she is an interesting new entrant, it seems. I don't really know anything about her except that, she's Māori, got quite a background there, and she will add to the lesbian contingent in Parliament.
Yes,
I'm sure Larissa Wall and other people will be think she'll be supportive of what they're trying to achieve, etc. So that's all good.
She's been whisked away by Nationals minders for a crash course in media training.
Yeah, I'd hope so, because she's a broadcaster, of course, a very successful businesswoman. ran the Eye to Eye show for Willie Jackson, has made some very successful documentaries, including I think with Pilger at one point. So she is a successful person, but broadcasters tend to make very poor MPs. I think Maggie Barry would be the most recent because they think they're witty and I hope that the National Party media team is giving her plenty of support, because there is going to be a lot of attention on her when she gets to Wellington. I mean, this week we had 300 national government employed, 354 social workers. Now a Maori lesbian South Auckland businesswoman is going to go in Parliament with a blue rosette. I mean, I think she's joked that it would be good if she was a bit disabled too. Then she'd have everything, but she's got nearly everything. And it's extraordinary. Although, having said that, we've heard in the context of the Gilmore affair, and that Nationals somehow, John Key has got rid of Nationals' toffee-nosed image. But I think it's quite wrong in the sense that I think has been something that the liberal media and the liberal elite like to think is true. But if you think of, it was Marilyn Waring was the first openly homosexual MP in our country. She was national. The last three successful national prime ministers, John Key was born in a state house. Jim Bolger had to leave school at 15 to help on the farm. Muldoon was brought up essentially by a solo mum because his father was mentally ill with syphilis.
Working class
and when you think about that, those people have a far more working class background, all of them, than Helen Clark.
It shows that people can betray their roots.
Well, it shows that we have social mobility in New Zealand.
Let's end the show on a final word. Keith, your final word this week is?
I think the Amnesty International New Zealand has laid down a bit of a challenge to New Zealanders, saying that we should help President Obama close the Guantanamo base by taking some of the people who have been cleared for release. You know, they've been interrogated for years, not guilty of anything, tortured, everything else. Why don't we take some of them? Often it's a test of your humanity, really. Are you so sort of timid and scared of the so-called war on terror that if they've been in Guantanamo they might be terrorists and we're going to get blown up in our beds? Or do you see them as people that we could host here? That's I put that challenge out.
It'd be wonderful neighbours for you, Mr. Hooton. Your final word this week?
The impact of gay marriage. The private polling by the major parties shows both National and Labour sharply down. National in one private poll has a poll number with a 3 in the front of it as a result of gay marriage. And Winston Peters and the CCCP, Colin Craig's Conservative Party, has moved up sharply. And both Labour and National will be aware of that. So, I mean, I think it's fantastic New Zealand has legislated for gay marriage. Maurice Williamson has shown that the New Zealand right is actually is a liberal right as opposed to the American right, which is a conservative right. But the two major parties won't be doing any major social reform for a few more years as a result of those poll numbers.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Keith. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, only the most naive New Zealander would have thought for 1 millisecond that National would change the only feature of MMP that has benefited them. The coat-tail was always staying. As New Zealand diversifies in culture, an old white rich boys club like National can't maintain political hegemonic dominance when the electoral system is representative. So they are going to take advantage where they can find them. And in the coat-tailing provision, National have their gerrymander of choice. The largest impact of the 2008 free market global implosion is that it has splintered the New Zealand political spectrum and burnt the middle ground. There is no more political centre that every party will try and fight over. 2014 will be a battle of extremes. It will either be a National ACT Conservative government or a Labour, Greens and Mana government. The country's a very centre of gravity is what will be fought over in 2014. Are we an innately self-interested and anti-intellectual people, or are we egalitarian and progressive? If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded new citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.